Kirkland is undergoing an absolutely fascinating transformation right now. For decades, it's been totally defined by these established residential neighborhoods, really lush green spaces, and a super strong family-friendly vibe. But right now, it's taking on a completely new dimension. The arrival of the REM, the Razzo Express Metropolitan, is literally fundamentally changing how buyers, sellers, and locals view this entire community. To navigate this, you've really got to have a highly structured, strategic approach if you want to actually succeed in this real estate market. So let's dive right into this explainer and see what's going on.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the macro shift of the RM, look at the Q2 2026 market data, unpack what buyers actually want, translate that into real advice for local sellers, and finally, break down Dennis Lupien's specific real estate strategy.
All right, part 1. Le Firem à Kirkland, Kirkland's mobility evolution.
So we're basically watching Kirkland evolve from a relatively quiet, heavily car-dependent suburb into this highly connected regional mobility hub. And with this massive identity shift comes a pretty big reality check, right? It's the friction of today versus the permanent connectivity of tomorrow. Because let's be honest, progress rarely arrives quietly. Both buyers and sellers have to weigh the intermittent construction noise, the dust, the temporary detours, against tomorrow's incredible transit access, brand new pedestrian connections, and long-term station area development. You really have to look past the construction dust of today to clearly see the permanent reality of the neighborhood.
And that brings us to an absolutely crucial concept: property-specific exposure. Look, when a massive transit line comes rolling into town, broad sweeping assumptions completely fail. You can't just say, oh, the REM is great for Kirkland, and apply that exact same logic to every single house equally. It doesn't work like that. Every single property has to be evaluated individually. Why? Because the impact depends entirely on proximity. Are you right next door to a noisy work zone or a bustling new parking area? Or are you maybe just far enough away to still enjoy the peace and quiet while only being a 5-minute walk to the station? That unique exposure is quite literally everything.
Moving on to part 2, Le Marché au Terre 2026, the reality of the numbers.
Let's ground this whole conversation in some hard data. 60. There were exactly 60 residential sales in Kirkland during the second quarter of 2026, and over the previous 4 quarters, there were 197 sales. This specific number, 60 sales in a single quarter, it proves that despite all the construction and the shifting landscape, the market here is highly active. People are making moves, and transactions are just steadily rolling along.
Next up, we have $950,000. This was the approximate median price for single-family homes in Kirkland during that exact same Q2 2026 period, and that really establishes the financial baseline for the area. Just to give you some broader context here, around that same time, the wider Montreal market had a median single-family price of about $650,000. So Kirkland is undeniably holding on to a premium position, which really just reflects its exceptional quality of life combined with this newly added connectivity.
And 37. Homes spent an average of 37 days on the market. Now, a very quick disclaimer here. These figures are just a snapshot of historical market context, okay? They're not some guaranteed crystal ball for the future. Market conditions obviously fluctuate based on things like mortgage rates, consumer confidence, and available inventory. But an average of 37 days tells us that correctly priced homes in Kirkland were finding buyers pretty efficiently.
All right, let's look at part 3. C'est que cherchent les acheteurs? Buyer priorities in an evolving city.
The arrival of the REM is fundamentally shifting the specific things today's buyers are hunting for. The buyer pool in Kirkland is diversifying right before our eyes. You've got professionals who have to commute to Montreal and are absolutely thrilled to finally ditch the highway traffic. You have households that are desperately seeking alternatives to driving every single day. But here's the really crucial part. While this improved mobility attracts a very transit-focused wave of people, a massive segment of the market still highly values Kirkland's traditional traits. We're talking privacy, large lots, ample parking, and incredibly quiet streets. So a successful sale really means figuring out exactly which of these buyer profiles your home appeals to the most.
Which leads us perfectly into part 4. Conseils les vendeurs locaux, strategic advice for sellers.
If you are selling a property in Kirkland right now, how do you actually position it effectively without setting some wild, unrealistic expectations? Well, for sellers, the absolute most important piece of advice is this. Avoid presenting the REM as an automatic value increase for every single property. I know it is incredibly tempting to just assume the news station is an instant goldmine, but think about it. If your home is directly adjacent to temporary construction or increased traffic, buyers are going to see that immediately. You need a much more nuanced marketing approach, one that respects the buyer's intelligence and, frankly, just addresses the property's specific reality.
Instead of just hype, sellers really need to present what we call the complete proposition. You can't just sell proximity to transit. You have to sell the whole shebang. Yes, you highlight the convenient regional transport, of course, but you also have to emphasize the established community, the lush green spaces, any energy efficiency improvements the home has, and the very practical parking situation. And crucially, you have to provide a realistic, calm response to any temporary construction concerns. It is a holistic approach that showcases true, well-rounded quality of life.
I love this quote so much because it's pretty much the golden rule of modern real estate. Clear communication builds credibility. Buyers are more likely to trust a seller who acknowledges both advantages and adjustments. Look, if you try to hide the fact that there are dump trucks down the street, the buyer is just going to get anxious. But if you're transparent, if you just acknowledge those temporary adjustments while simultaneously highlighting the long-term advantages, you build immense trust. And at the end of the day, trust is exactly what closes deals.
And finally, Part 5. La stratégie de Denise, the win-win methodology.
Let's talk about how a seasoned professional actually executes all of this in the real world. Dennis Lopien has an incredibly impressive track record. He's been a bilingual real estate broker since 1994, bringing over 30 years of deep authority and experience specifically in Kirkland and the West Island. But what makes his approach really stand out isn't just his tenure, it's his whole philosophy. He operates on a strictly win-win methodology. He prioritizes totally transparent communication and finding balanced, realistic terms. It's not about just aggressively pushing for the absolute highest price if it ruins a solid deal. It's about creating real, lasting value for both the buyer and the seller.
He actually structures a sale to navigate Kirkland's evolving market super smoothly, and he does it through a comprehensive 6-step guidance process. It kicks off with Step 1, a strategic evaluation of the property's very specific exposure to these mobility changes. Step 2 is personalized planning, which is tailoring a precise timeline to the client's actual goals. Step 3 is professional preparation, just making sure the absolute best features shine. Step 4 is expert marketing, targeting those exact right buyer profiles we discussed earlier. Step 5 is strategic negotiation, where he fiercely protects the client's interests while seeking out those durable terms. And finally, Step 6, post-transaction follow-up, making sure there's continuous support even after the ink is dry. It's a highly structured, basically foolproof blueprint.
Which leaves us with this final, vital question. Mobility is transforming Kirkland. Is your property ready for 2026? The landscape is shifting quickly, and the way homes are valued is changing right along with it. If you're sitting there wondering how your specific property fits into this whole new reality, you really don't have to guess. Dennis Lopien actually offers a free, personalized property evaluation. Honestly, it's the absolute best next step to find out exactly where you stand in this super exciting, rapidly evolving market. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.